Now, Jason is going to talk for at least an hour, so if you want to... He thinks this is a brief he's presenting or something. Thank you. Hi. Good morning. My name is Charles Dollar, and I'm the chair of the Emmett Leahy Award Committee. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the presentation of the Emmett Leahy Award to Jason R. Barron of the National Archives and Records Administration for outstanding contributions to the records and information management profession. I'm sure that there's some of you who may not recognize the name Emmett Leahy or Ed Leahy as he was known, and you may be wondering, who is this guy and why is there an award bearing his name? I want to take just a couple of minutes to give you, well, actually 9 minutes, to give you a brief biographical sketch of Ed Leahy and a history of the Emmett Leahy Award. Emmett Leahy was born on December 10th, 1910, about 20 blocks north of this building. Grew up in Washington, D.C., attended high school and here in D.C., and in his third year of high school, he elected to become a probationer under the Christian Brothers School and graduated through that program and enrolled at American University and then at LaSalle University, where he graduated in 1933. He taught high school in conjunction with a year at LaSalle University and then moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1933, where he taught at Boys High School. He taught history. He was still on track to go through the completion of all the steps to become a member of the Christian Brothers School Order until he met Betty McGinnis. And they met at an ice cream parlor, but you don't want to know about that right now. In any case, they started dating, and in 1934, Leahy, who had enrolled in the graduate school at the University of Pittsburgh working on a master's degree in history, decided to come to Washington, D.C., get a job that paid something so he and Betty could marry. So his first job in the federal government was as a file clerk at the Federal Trade Commission, not too far from here, is it? And he worked at that, and he saw the construction of the National Archives building occurring here, and he decided to get a job, or to apply for a job. So he applied for the job, and he was actually interviewed by one of the senior people in the administration of the National Archives, Dorsey Hyde Jr. And one of the striking things about Leahy's selection is that of the first group of people recruited in the National Archives to be archivist, he did not have a PhD, he was not working on a PhD, and he had not even finished his MA degree program at the University of Pittsburgh. So he must have made a very striking impression on Dorsey Hyde. So what he did, when he came on board in July the 25th of 1935, he became part of a group called examiners. And examiners, under the authority of the National Archives Act of 1934, were authorized to go out and inspect records of agencies and to identify those that are of permanent value and those that are of useless value. And Leahy's work concentrated on the useless value side, working largely at the Treasury Department. He and the other examiners quickly realized that trying to identify records of permanent value and even records of useless value was very, very difficult because of the terrible state of the management of the records. And so Ed Leahy and another National Archives staff member named Phil Brooks became strong proponents of engagement with the agencies to help them improve the management of the records long before they would come to the custody of the National Archives. So Phil Brooks and Ed Leahy, with the strong support of Solon J. Buck, the second archivist of the United States, his pictures on the portraits hanging on the wall on that card if you go out, a stern-looking man, and he was somewhat of a stern person. But in any event, he strongly supported what was then called records administration. Leahy worked in the National Archives until December of 1941, when he moved to the Department of the Navy to become the records administration coordinator or officer for the Department of the Navy. And in that capacity, he greatly expanded the current records administration work. He, among other things, strongly enforced work to identify the enormous volume of useless records that the Navy Department had. He introduced work simplification in the form of identifying forms that collected redundant information. He created the first agency records management center and a garage in Alexandria, Virginia, to free up space for more important records in the Navy Department. And he was an expert, an evangelist in the use of microfilm for the reduction of records. So Ed Leahy worked at the Navy until 1945. He was a commissioned officer, commander. He resigned his commission and started work for the Remington Rand Corporation as a national sales manager for microfilm and a records management consultant. He was in that job for 2 years when he decided to establish a National Records Management Council for the promotion of records management. And it was in that capacity that he was, as a national expert, he was invited to join the Hoover Commission and to chair a task force dealing with the reduction of records in the federal government. Coming out of that activity, of course, eventually was the creation of the General Services Administration, and in 1949 the National Archives becoming a part of the General Services Administration. But what's far more important about the work that Ed Leahy did was that he was a member of the National Archives Advisory Council that advised the archivist. He represented the Secretary of the Navy. He participated in substantive discussions of the Records Disposal Act of 1943, the Draft Public Records Act of 1944, the Disposal Act of 1945, and the Executive Order 9847, I think, that established records officers in federal agencies. That was in 1946. The key thing about Leahy is his major contribution, I think, as a pioneer, is that the Public Records Act of 1944 was based on a proposal he submitted to the Bureau of Budget in 1942. Key provisions of that bill, of the draft bill, never was enacted, were incorporated into the Federal Records Act of 1950. And so Ed Leahy had an enormous contribution to make to the promotion of records management. Now, this is a historic occasion in my view, because we're meeting in the Archivist reception room. Back in my time, we called it room 105. But in this very room, Ed Leahy sat as a member of the National Archives Advisory Council and offered substantive comments on legislation, proposed legislation that had to be approved by the Bureau of the Budget before it could go to the appropriate committee or subcommittee of Congress. So this is historic. We're sitting in the place somewhere where Ed Leahy sat. Not only is it historic in that respect, but today, Jason Barron is the 42nd recipient of the Emmett J. Leahy Award for Outstanding Contributions to Records Management. But he's not the first member of the staff of the National Archives to receive that reward. In fact, there are seven others, beginning with Ev Aldridge in 1969, Mark Koenig, 1974, Ben Oliver, 1978, Frank Evans, 1995, myself, 2005, Ken Thibodeau, 2008, Ken, thank you, and today, Jason Barron. So it's a historic occasion. And I want to add one other comment. There are a number of guests here, but I do want to highlight especially the fact that we have members of the Emmett Leahy Award Committee, Ken Thibodeau and I, and John Phillips, whom I will introduce momentarily, are current members of the Emmett Leahy Award Committee. The Emmett Leahy Award Committee has a rolling membership in that each recipient serves for 10 years and becomes an alumnus, and the next recipient replaces that individual. So we have two people here today, Jim Coulson, Fred, where are you? Fred Deers, who are former recipients of the Emmett Leahy Award. We're glad to have them here. Now, Thank you for allowing me to share these brief thoughts with you about Emmett Leahy. And I'd like to invite, I believe, the 10th Archivist of the United States, the Honorable David S. Ferriero, for his remarks.
Thank you, Charles. There is some irony in the late Mr. Leahy's history here, Jason, around records of useless value. That isn't lost on me. We're honored to be hosting this Leahy Award ceremony here today. As Charles just noted, Emmett Leahy was a longtime esteemed member of the Greater National Archives family, and we have a lot of former members of the family here with us today. Welcome back. It's special pride to NARA that we celebrate and honor one of our lawyers with this prestigious award. Jason Barron is Director of Litigation in our Office of General Counsel. He is, in fact, the first and only person to have held this position, having been selected by Gary Stern, our General Counsel, to come to the National Archives in 2000. Came here after serving 20 years as a trial lawyer in the government, first at the Department of Health and Human Services, and then after a dozen years in the Civil Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. In addition to a prior award from NARA that Jason received while still a Justice Department attorney for his work in fashioning the 1995 email regulations, in the decade since he came here to work, Jason has been recognized with 3 of the highest honors this agency gives. He received Archivist Awards in 2002 for extraordinary efforts in reviewing presidential email records and assisting the Justice Department in the U.S. versus Philip Morris case in 2005. For extraordinary services to the White House, the Senate, the public, and the press in providing access to records pertaining to John Roberts, and in 2009 for bringing the electronic records of the George W. Bush administration into NARA's custody. He's received many other honors and awards as well during his time in government, including those from DOJ, NSC, HSS, SSA, as well as a Fed 100 award for his contributions to e-discovery advocacy. In my almost 2 years as archivist, I've come to know Jason Barron and appreciate his expertise and respect he's earned from his peers. In his time at the Department of Justice and the National Archives, he's become what many people regard as the go-to lawyer in the government on issues involving preservation of electronic records under the Federal Records Act. I know that Gary Stern and all of us at NARA greatly value his advice and counsel on all such matters and in zealously defending the interests of this agency in litigation. In fact, it's nice to have both Gary and Jason on our side. I've also seen Jason in action at NARA conferences, and as I'm sure many of you have, and I can tell you that he always exceeds expectations, which isn't hard when the subject is compliance with records management. And he is surely destined for his own slot in the Comedy Central lineup, so stay tuned. Jason is truly an enthusiastic champion of NARA's mission everywhere he goes, and believe me, he has gone everywhere, from Barcelona to Beijing, having given lectures and conducted workshops in numerous countries around the world, in addition to making over 200 appearances in the United States before federal agencies and at conference venues. We never know where he is. In recent years, Jason has been a thought leader in pushing the federal government to adopt smarter forms of electronic archiving and in finding better ways to search through large volumes of the government's electronically stored record information. Finally, I can tell you all that Jason is universally admired and liked by NARA staff. Just one example is an email that came in about today's event from a longtime senior archivist, Mark Ferguson, in our Denver regional office. Congratulations on winning the Emmett Leahy Award, the Nobel and Pulitzer of our profession. There is no higher honor for records managers. I'm so pleased that a NARA employee won it, and it is well deserved. We in the National Records Management Program are so fortunate to have a director of litigation who actually takes an interest in the missions of our agency and provides such excellent counsel on how we should approach the complex issues facing life cycle management of federal records. I'm glad you stayed on past your stated retirement date to get this honor. Jason, from all 3,500 of us in the Nara family, we extend our sincere congratulations and deep thanks for everything that you have done for us.
I would like to invite U.S. Federal Magistrate Judge, the Honorable John Facciola.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm a little concerned about talking to an audience where people are standing. It seems to me there are only two possibilities. They're going to put me on their shoulders and lead me out to be their king, or they're going to put me on a rail, tar and feather me, and take me out of here. And if you remember what Lincoln said about the guy who was tarred and feathered and let out on a rail, the guy said, you know, if it wasn't for the honor, I would have foregone the whole damn thing. I am honored to come and be part of the celebration of the extraordinary achievements of my dear friend, Jason Barron. The fates decreed that Jason and I would meet and would have a close personal friendship and a professional relationship. I began my career, at least in private practice, as a lawyer for Indian tribes. And I spent most of it in dusty, dirty warehouses in the middle of nowhere, looking through old records, looking for mistreatment of my clients by the United States, which frankly wasn't that hard to find. And I spent a lifetime of doing this. Indeed, in a strange way that you'll get a kick out of knowing, I had an experience which led to the discovery of one of the most famous records in American history. And I represented the Yankton Sioux. The Sioux Nation would achieve the greatest award against the United States in history, $100 million for the gold in the Black Hills. There was always a question of why it was that the gold miners were permitted to enter the Black Hills when the cavalry was standing there and supposedly keeping them out, because it was perceived there would be war between the Lakota Sioux and the United States if they got in. In any event, one morning there the gold miners were, and there the 7th Cavalry was gone. And it was an expert witness working for us who found in the archives the order, the secret order that Grant had issued telling the cavalry to get out of there. An order that would later be described by Judge Nichols of the Court of Claims as evidence of the most despicable act in American history. Nevertheless, for every little piece of gold I found, I did this 5 million times. And then computers came. And I remember going to the guy's house. He paid $10, and he demonstrated a spreadsheet on his computer. $10. And if you've gone through life terrified of columns of numbers, this was magical. He changed the middle number, and all the other ones changed. I was stupefied. This actually held out the hope I would be able to balance my checkbook, which I'd never have. And then I saw the first demonstration of a database, and I said, I gotta get one. And I had more fun playing with this thing. And I used it on terribly significant stuff. First of all, recipes for grandma's pasta from all the sources, and Italian-American baseball players, whom I organized by last name, batting average, and position. There came a time, a very happy time, when I met Jason for the first time. I think I had seen him before then in my courtroom glaring at me from the front row, noting all those errors for appeal. But there came a time, and I guess it was at Sedona, Jason teases me whenever a judge gets reversed in the computer legal research, there's a little red flag. Jason has suggested that I should put that red flag on the sailboat. If I should be lost at sea, everybody will say, hey, that was Facciola. But it was decreed that we would meet, and I heard Jason speak. And I knew, suddenly and completely, I was in the presence of an extraordinarily creative imagination. There was about Jason a sense of playfulness, which may seem odd, but in my view, it is the heart and soul of his genius. I had the wonderful occasion once, Jason and I were somewhere, and there was a piano. Jason sat down and began to improvise on a jazz theme and indicated to me that's what he hoped to do someday. And it occurred to me, as I thought about Jason, in preparation for today, that playful creativity displayed on that piano so guilelessly, so completely, is the same playfulness that animates Jason's intelligence and his desire to learn in this area. This may seem odd, but it occurs to me that without that playfulness, there can be no creativity. I have just finished one of the most, about to finish, hopefully, thank God it's Friday. One of the most, it's not Friday, it's Thursday. You can see what kind of week I've had. And it's been one of the most challenging aspects, periods of my judicial career. I have completed 4 opinions in 72 hours, all of them under emergency conditions, and that's why I don't even know what day it is. And last night I broke away to go to a reception. We celebrated the birthday of the centennial of the birth of William B. Bryant, after whom our courthouse is named. And I had to run back to finish one of these bloody opinions because the Court of Appeals wanted it this morning. And as I walked back to my office, I thought, you know, this is fun. And my second thought was, Facciola, you need a life. But I have seen in Jason a playfulness of imagination. And I think that is the heart and soul of the genius it takes to communicate that to others. Jason's most significant contribution is to take a topic that would pour the pants off a Talmudic rabbi and make it fun. I mean, if I told you were going to hear him speak about Trek and you would laugh a lot, you would think I was crazy. But that is exactly what occurs. I'm reminded what it was said about Holmes in his 90s, that he was still amused by what he did. Like me, Jason, we have both passed retirement age. And like Jason, people often come up to me and say, why don't you go out and make some money? And I remind them of what Tug McGraw said. He pitched for the Mets. He wrote a book called Screwball, which was simultaneously his best pitch and the condition between his ears. And they asked old Tug what was he going to do with all this money. He said, well, it's about 85% of it I'm going to spend on Irish whiskey and women. The rest I'm just going to waste. Jason's influence on me has been profound in so many ways. First of all, in permitting me to share his playful excitement about how we look for things. Anyone who doesn't appreciate the importance of that cannot be living in the 21st century. We don't make cars. We don't make machines that make cars. We have to find the information that tells the machine how to make the car. Jason's extraordinary contribution and how to do that is one of the most significant scholarly contributions of the 21st century in the legal profession. And I say that without fear of contradiction. Its influence on me has been profound. Thanks to Jason, I had a case called O'Keefe. And in it, the lawyers came in throwing keywords at each other. They had no more idea about keywords than they did about life on the moon. But one said, well, if we use Jones as opposed to Smith, we'll get it. I then proceeded to write an opinion in which I pointed out that that's exactly what we did not need. What we needed was a sophisticated intelligence to try to understand this. My law clerks don't let me have any fun, because the footnote they made me take out said, most lawyers think that they're experts in using keywords because they once found a Chinese restaurant in San Francisco using Google. That was the level of technical competence in this area with which Jason and I have had to deal. I was pilloried for that footnote, saying Facciola is doing nothing more than making business for vendors. He's probably on the take. It's a suit from Joseph Bank. I'm on the take, right? Honda Civic parked outside. But Jason came to my defense and explained the necessity of what I was saying. Thank God for that. I'm reminded of the great line in Duck Soup where, if you remember, Harpo, Checo, and Gummo are being soldiers. And Groucho is standing next to Margaret Dumont, and he says, can't you see that these men are fighting for her honor? Which is more than she ever did. But thanks to Jason's noble defense, my reputation, such as it is, survived. Second profound influence that Jason had on me was in providing me with one of the greatest experiences of my life. The archivist up in Hyde Park at the FDR home wanted to get a painting that had been stuck in this admiral's office for several hundred years, a beautiful painting of FDR and his sailboat crossing the bow of the Independence. And the archivist said to Jason, geez, you know anybody who knows anything about sailing and FDR? And since I'm the only human being on the earth who fit in that category, thanks to Jason, I had the honor of speaking at Hyde Park about that. And I want to tell Jason that I'm sure he's as tickled as I am to learn that yesterday I got an application for a clerkship from one Tracy Roosevelt, i.e. FDR's great-granddaughter. And now she's in the running now. Don't jump to any conclusion. The second influence Jason had on me was in my resolution of the White House backup tapes case. As you remember, a group called Crew said that some emails had mysteriously disappeared from the White House and that they were evidence of how the United States had gone to war in a particular instance. I got enmeshed in what to do about all of that, but then confronted the situation that administrations were about to change. And I had 48 hours to do something. And I thought long and hard about what I was going to do. I must tell you that, as far as I'm concerned, this is a sacred place. I have always believed that the archives perform one of the most vital functions in a democracy. And in that opinion, I reminded myself of that by quoting what Napoleon Bonaparte, said about France. He said he didn't much care who wrote France's laws if he could write its history. I was confronted as to what to do with these tapes that had come into the possession. Between administrations, one administration had defeated the other, what to do. It was because of my recollection and my feelings of the integrity, honesty, and proficiency of Jason Barron that I decided to place those records into the supervisory custody of you, Mr. Archivist. There was a direct relationship between what I knew of Jason and the confidence that I had that this precious part of American history was in good hands. It would have been enough if Jason simply knew all this and served the archivist, but he hasn't stopped there. I know of no one who has taught more people more about these topics. I have been with Jason on many of those occasions. I have told Jason that thanks to him, I will never, never say no to an invitation to speak to either records managers or lawyers in public service, because he is the archetype of public service. I have spent 30 years in the service of my country, and I will hopefully spend some more. But thanks to Jason, I will always feel indebted to that community of lawyers and record keepers. And as I say, Jason has decided to communicate to that group and others and to share his profound knowledge. Without him, I don't know where we would be in even the most fundamental understanding of how you look for things. Lawyers are terrible technicians. There is about to be issued a study by the Indiana Law School, post-JD 5 years later, asking young lawyers where they're strong and where they're weak. To a person, they describe technology as the weakest part of their intellectual makeup. With Jason, I have tried to battle this. Lawyers, in particular, excuse themselves from this knowledge. I have had clowns appear before me and with a straight face say, "You know, Your Honor, I just don't understand this computer stuff." Why a demonstration of total incompetence is meant to amuse me escapes me. Often, Jason has felt, I am sure, that he is pushing a big, big rock up a very high hill. But without him, this society would deeply be in much worse trouble than it is. So let me end with the recollection. When I was a kid, I was very lucky. I went to a Jesuit high school in New York City, and we were blessed by the fact that the Jesuits didn't think our education ended at 3 o'clock. They took us all around town to see things. And I guess the night I became a lawyer and judge was the night that I saw Robert Bolt's A Man for All Season, about Thomas More. It tells the story of More's ultimate destruction. And a significant part of it is a character named Rich. Rich comes to London from the north of England full of ambition. He wants to make his way in the world. And he is going to either backslap or put knives in the backs of anybody who gets in his way. Of course, this took place in Tudor England, has nothing to do with modern-day Washington. But More becomes aware that Rich is conflicted and that his perdition awaits him if he goes in a certain direction. And indeed, he will. He is the architect of the trumped-up Star Chamber proceeding that leads More to leave his life. If you walk 3 blocks from here and go to St. Patrick's Church, you will see the statue of St. Thomas More, which has just been put there by the former pastor, a good friend of mine named Peter Vaghi, who was a lawyer and is now a priest, which is either a step up or a step down, depending on your point of view. If you look at it, you will see that More is pointing down, and at his feet is the chain of his office, which is removed from his neck by the king's men when he refuses to swear allegiance to the oath of supremacy as king of the Church of England. Earlier than that, he and Rich confront each other. And Rich says, "Sir Thomas, you must prefer me. You must speak to the Duke of Norfolk to get me a position." More says, "Rich, a man should not go where he is tempted." Rich says, "What shall I do, Sir Thomas?" And Sir Thomas says, "You're a teacher, Rich. Why don't you teach?" And Rich says, "Sir Thomas, if I teach, who will know?" Sir Thomas says, "Well, Rich, you, your students, and God." Not a bad audience, Rich. So congratulations, Jason. And by the way, not a bad audience, Jason.
It's now my pleasure to introduce John Phillips, who is a retiring member of the Emmett Leahy Award Committee, which is an independent organization and makes its selection based solely upon specified criteria. John?
Hello. It's a pleasure to be here to speak with you today. We're obviously going to be recognizing Jason Barron. And the Emmett Leahy Committee's goal is to recognize excellence in the professional fields of records and information management. We're here to recognize the accomplishments of an individual that has made singularly grand and broad accomplishments in the professions and contributions to both the legal profession and the records and information management professions. Records and information management today, as we see it, is in turmoil. Records managers, their customers, IT organizations, legal counsel, and the creators of records are all overwhelmed. We're all overwhelmed by the volume and the variety of information that we're creating these days. And of course, as we create all of this information, our business models are changing and we're creating new types of information. So we're creating emails, office documents, web pages, database data, and we're even using cloud-based architectures, and we're all becoming more and more concerned about business records, evidence for court proceedings, and even historical treasures that are really being put at risk. For these reasons, today's offices are confronted with changing professional responsibilities and expectations for both records managers and IT, the business users, archivists, and litigation attorneys regarding regulation and litigation and compliance and how we're going to all deal with that. Now, we often talk about teaming in our projects between records management and IT and legal and the business users because we want to create solutions to these problems. But the reality is what we've really needed was a lawyer on the inside, a lawyer that understood these issues and took them to heart and understood both the technologies and the law and could demonstrate that understanding. Fortunately for us, an individual took the lead in this arena and in understanding both the issues and the technology issues, the legal issues, and began to bring this arena together and change actually the way we look at how we manage information. Now, this individual is often associated with some landmark litigation cases, landmark federal court cases. In the 1990s, as a lead attorney for the government in the Profs case, and also in the GRS 20 case, he helped set new expectations regarding how email would be managed in the federal government and the federal agencies, especially in regards to metadata capture and the importance of capturing metadata as it being an important and integral part of records. Then, after coming to the National Archives in 2000, he led a team of 25 archivists and lawyers that responded to the discovery demands in the United States versus Philip Morris case. This was a lawsuit brought by the Justice Department of the Clinton administration against the tobacco companies, allegations that they were violating RICO statutes. This intense experience of having to search through millions of emails and looking at the limitations of keyword searching let him realize that this is going to be very difficult if we pursue this mechanism to meet discovery obligations. So especially on the topic of search and retrieval, he helped us focus on numerous activities that created information management insights regarding these issues. For example, in his work on the Sedona Conference, he was included as an acting editor of the publications, editor-in-chief of some of the publications of that conference, and especially in the areas of legal practice and information research. He also helped found the legal track for the National Institute of Standards and the Technology Text Retrieval Conference. This unique international research project evaluating competing search methods used by lawyers has been widely considered to be of value across a number of professions and disciplines. He's considered a leader in the legal profession and encouraging thinking about alternative search methods. This is very important to all of our professions. And his research efforts are bearing fruit, and that we're finding that it is being documented that in some cases machine learning has been documented as outperforming a manual search of documents by human beings. In addition, he founded an international series of workshops known as the DESI workshops, which stands for the Discovery of Electronically Stored Information. In this field of academics with information science and computer science, together with artificial intelligence experts, they got together with the representatives of the legal community and discussed ways to improve searching for information in litigation contexts. In addition, he's known for a number of firsts. This was the first individual to deliver a presentation on metadata at a Managing Electronic Records Management conference that was a lawyer. He was the first Department of Justice attorney to spend 10,000 plus hours litigating Federal Records Act cases involving email, and also assisted NARA in 1995 in crafting the first federal regulations regarding email management. He's the first lawyer to participate in inter pares. He's the first and only director of litigation at NARA. And he's the first to teach an electronic discovery course at an information management school. He's the first federal lawyer to co-chair the Sedona Conference Working Group on Electronic Document and Production, and probably the first federal lawyer to have created a YouTube video on electronic discovery. And of course, he's the first federal lawyer to win the Emmett Leahy Award and only the second lawyer to do so. So as you're aware, the person I'm talking about is Jason R. Barron. Jason has been a widely respected and unique leader in these fields for decades. He has brought his extensive knowledge and experience in records management and e-discovery issues to help set best practices and set legal precedents. In addition, he's helped educate legal and records management professionals both on the important issues regarding preservation of information and litigation-related issues to discovery. He's accomplished this through a career of scholarship and lecturing throughout the United States and the rest of the world, while acting as a federal attorney, working at the National Archives with the Sedona Conference, and also teaching at universities simultaneously. So in all of these capacities, he's looked upon as a thought leader in records and information management and setting legal precedents. So for all of these reasons, Jason Barron is very deserving of the Emmett Leahy Award that celebrates the professional achievements and the international admiration that he has achieved. So I'd like to introduce you to Jason Barron. Need to retain these now.
Gosh, this is way better than a retirement party. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm profoundly grateful to Charles Dollar, to John Phillips, to Jim Coulson, and each of the members of the Emmett Leahy Award Committee for the great honor and privilege you have bestowed to me. I couldn't do any better here than to quote Adrian Cunningham, last year's winner of the Leahy Award in Australia, when he said that adding my name to the distinguished list of previous award recipients when there are so many other seemingly more worthy recipients who have not been so recognized is both totally surprising and also immensely humbling. And I feel exactly the same way. Let me also say my thanks to David Ferriero, Archivist of the United States, to Judge John Facciola, very kind words for all their past support and encouragement, and of course for taking the time to be present today. I wish to note for the record, as we lawyer types say, but it seems especially appropriate in this setting, that also present are Deputy Archivist Deborah Wall, colleagues from the White House, past Leahy Award winners, numerous colleagues from NARA, including the terrific attorneys and archivists who work with me in NARA's Office of General Counsel. There are also many close friends, colleagues from both the public and private sectors here, including a number of my Sedona Conference buddies, some of whom I recently climbed the Great Wall of China with on the day before we conducted an e-discovery workshop in Beijing. I can't leave out my former students from classes I've taught at the University of Maryland, as well as my friends and, of course, my family. I couldn't be happier than all of you took the time to attend. I intend to submit a scholarly piece on the future of information management and the law for the record of these proceedings for uploading on the Emmett Leahy webpage, but I would like to make more personal remarks here. I will get to my concerns about information management in a couple minutes, but after all, we're not at an SAA or ARMA conference. We're at a more informal type of gathering, falling somewhere between a press conference and a substitute for a retirement party. So maybe it was in fact destiny that I have spent my life thinking about records. However, I confess that I couldn't really have imagined what my professional career would consist of when back in 1977 I wrote an honors thesis in college on the privacy implications of a vast electronic database maintained by the FBI and accessible by the international organization Interpol. Later, after graduation from law school, where I got an A+ in FOIA law, It's one of my few A's. In one fashion or another, I always somehow got myself involved in the thick of records-related matters, including major litigation. It is a tremendous honor to be the first practicing attorney in the federal government to receive this award, and I believe the second lawyer, as mentioned. I have never had a dull moment as a federal lawyer in 30 years of giving legal advice and litigating cases. I was very lucky to work first in the General Counsel's office at HHS on large class action cases, and then for a dozen years at the Department of Justice. I will always be grateful to Renee Wallenhouse for encouraging me to think about coming to DOJ, and for David Anderson and others in Federal Programs Branch for having the faith in me. While at DOJ, I got the chance to work on record-keeping lawsuits of landmark importance, as mentioned, most notably the Armstrong case, also known as the Prost case. My then supervisor, Elizabeth Pugh, is Elizabeth here? Who later became general counsel at NARA, asked me if I wanted to work on the Armstrong lawsuit in June 1992. She said it wasn't going to amount to much and would soon go away. Her hoodwinking me ended with my spending those 10,000 hours in the 1990s on email litigation was the start of nearly 20 years of my continuously attending to the subject of preserving White House email and the electronic records of the government as a whole. As noted, when I came to NARA, I quickly became engulfed in the RICO lawsuit against Big Tobacco, which involved searches of millions of White House emails. This early experience at NARA led me to what my colleagues in the e-discovery world have heard me describe as my personal grail quest in attempting to educate the legal profession about more advanced, more efficient ways lawyers can use search techniques through vast collections of electronically stored information. My journey led me to pursue two of the smartest people in the information science world, one of whom is here, Dr. Ellen Voorhees at NIST, and Dr. Doug Ord, professor of computer science and information science at the University of Maryland, who together green-lighted and fostered the Trek legal track with me, a unique research platform to evaluate competing search methodologies. I was subsequently approached by members of the AI and law community to foster what blossomed into an international series of so-called DESI workshops that have brought together academics and lawyers to think about profound issues of information retrieval in the legal space. Along the way, Leahy Award winner Bob Williams gave me an early showcase at Cohasset to discuss an emerging law of metadata in 1996. And Leahy Award winner Luciana Durante invited me to teach cyberspace law at the University of British Columbia in 2000 for a semester and to take part in Inter Pares. I am so very grateful for those invites and for the invites of many of you here to past conferences, workshops, briefings, and events. I am also so grateful to Richard Brayman at the Sedona Conference, a true visionary who has been so supportive of all of my efforts to advance the path of the law of search and information retrieval in a just and reasonable way. And I can't leave out, for the past 11 years, I have been enormously privileged to work in my dream job here at NARA for NARA's General Counsel, Gary Stern, who gives his staff the freedom to pursue their interests wherever they may lead around the US and the world. He only requires me to have a BlackBerry 24/7. I couldn't have done any of this or achieved so much without his support, in particular, the support of successive archivists and senior staff at this incomparable institution. And of course, I have been privileged to have such a wonderful family. My wife, Robin, has put up with my late nights and weekends, worrying about records management and e-discovery for going on 20 years this December. And when I come home for dinner, I talk about email. And seeing my high-achieving daughter, Rachel, blossom in high school is the most meaningful award of all. My late dad taught aeronautics at MIT. If he were around today, and if I told him I had received a Nobel Prize, he would say something like this: "That's very good, son, but just as so you know, Linus Pauling and Madame Curie each received 2 Nobel Prizes." So keep up the good work. Charles, please tell me that no one has received the Emmett Leahy Award twice. Okay. Seriously, though, I do feel a certain responsibility now that I've received this honor to clearly lay out a vision, admittedly from a lawyer's perspective, of some aspirational elements of information governance in the 21st century having to do with public and private sector records. And so let me just indulge me for a few more minutes. I'm going to make 3 basic points before this audience of records experts and e-discovery lawyer gurus. First, We need to declare an official end to the end user being expected to act as a de facto records manager. I typed that college honors thesis on an IBM Selectric typewriter and didn't have a PC at my work desk until 1987. With the profound changes in the workplace that have since occurred, it has become almost a cliche to point out we are overwhelmed in our professional and personal lives with the growth of electronic communications, first via email, voicemail, and the web, with endless possibilities for engaging in messaging and social networking, now on a vast array of mobile devices as well as PCs. With the notion of secretaries who acted as office managers controlling the workflow of documents and record keeping receding into distant memory, we are all tasked by our organizations to exercise responsible records management in addition to carrying out our primary job functions. This was last possible about 15 years ago when the volume of email traffic was far less in terms of messages of substance or lasting importance to the organization. It makes no difference, at least in my personal view, whether the government remains stuck in a print-to-paper paradigm for purposes of official record keeping, or chooses to spend millions in adopting electronic record-keeping software that depends on end users performing manual record-keeping functions. Those approaches are all a legacy of the late 20th century, 20th century thinking that we need to shake off and move away from. I am calling for workers of the world to unite, especially in the public sector, in opposing efforts to enslave them in record-keeping responsibilities when there are new and better automated ways to perform this vitally important function. Especially in a time of fiscal scarcity, it is all the more important that we be lean, smart, and agile on the record-keeping front. We need to understand that there are the technological means to accomplish record keeping, e-record keeping in 2011, if institutions have the will to convert to them. A cadre of committed folks at NARA are leading the way in testing automated archiving and capture technologies with smart filters and auto-categorization techniques, and I will continue to champion these approaches and promise to work with the best and brightest people, both in this organization and throughout the government, to ensure the success of these new approaches to capturing email and other forms of electronic records. Second, we all need to be more creatively interdisciplinary. My life and career has consisted of rowing between islands of excellence, including bringing the good news from the world of information retrieval and artificial intelligence to the world of lawyers. I strongly believe that the legal community has been too insular in its approach to e-discovery and needs to partner with academia and industry, including on insisting on optimization and e-discovery searches through the adoption of best practice standards, some of which may yet end up as recognized international standards, ISOs. But even on such seemingly mundane matters as how to execute a legal hold over records and information, we lawyer types remain largely stuck in a paradigm that too often relies on people rather than automated technologies and doesn't best utilize interdisciplinary resources. So my second call to arms here is to say to the legal community that they best serve their clients by bringing in records managers as well as CIOs and IT staff early on in litigation and investigations, and that the records community, particularly in government, should be sitting at the table when decisions are made in procurement as well as when agencies are in litigation crisis mode. The Rosetta Stone I talk about in my lectures needs to be used more for lawyers, for IT staff, and record staff to better understand each other's needs. Third, at the start of the second decade of the 21st century, we need to recognize that the time is now to prevent what I have termed the coming digital dark ages. And archivists and corporate information managers can take the lead on this. The ongoing exponentially increasing explosion of information means that over the next several decades of our careers, the world will be seeing records and information growth orders of magnitude larger than anything ever experienced by humankind on this planet to date. We all need better ways to search through these expanding universes of public and private sector electronically stored information. A century ago, the archivist Hillary Jenkinson said, we need, and I quote, to neutralize the threat of hopeless unwieldiness in our collective archives, and that was never more true than now. This administration has been pushing from day one for policies that serve to ensure greater openness and transparency throughout the government, and indeed, archivist David Ferriero has coined the phrase that records are the backbone of open government. But lest we forget, T.R. Schellenberg observed that, quote, an archivist has the dual objective of preserving materials and making them available for use. The challenge for all of us is in both preserving and making accessible electronic records. That's the challenge. Otherwise, there's near certainty that most of the history of the early 21st century, measured by volume, will not be open and available anytime soon, that such e-records may end up being de facto inaccessible to historians and researchers for 75 years or more. New automated tools and technologies are needed to ensure that personally identifiable information is filtered out of email archives, that new forms of software, such as clustering algorithms, are used to sort and categorize records worthy of more immediate opening in vast collections, and in general to ensure that more current access to electronic records is guaranteed. A couple of years back, I said while presenting at the Delos conference in Rome, hosted by 2009 Leahy Award winner Mariela Guercio, that our present daily collective digital experience is like experiencing a July 4th fireworks. And I must say this metaphor I think is going to work better here than it was in Italy. We see at a July 4th fireworks, we see an illumination, especially the climactic part of the fireworks. We see this abundance of light, abundance of noise. It's like data all around us, overwhelming us. And what happens after that illumination? The fireworks go out. It's dark, and it's not to be recovered. The paradox of our age is information overload followed by future inability to access anything of importance. We cannot let that future happen, so we all need to be smarter in preventing or mitigating this potential information dystopia. Those are my 3 calls to action. When I'm in this building, sometimes late at night, ready to go home, I go through the large doors downstairs you all came through, and I cross Pennsylvania Avenue. I always stop and turn to my right, looking east, where the Capitol Dome is lit up. The sight still brings a clutch to me after all these decades in this city. It still moves me to think that I'm so very lucky to have spent my time here doing my small part as a dedicated public servant to advance the cause of good government. I've always wanted to be the man in the arena, that's Teddy Roosevelt's phrase, not a critic on the sidelines. As this year's honoree, I wish to dedicate the rest of my life in continuing in these causes and dedicating my efforts towards education of the bench, the bar, of my federal colleagues and students in the classroom on the enduring importance of good records and information management principles in the digital age. And one last thing, as many of you know, I have had a countdown clock to retirement after 30 years in all of my public talks, and the alarm did go off 6 months ago as to my CSRS eligibility. Given all the exciting things that are happening, and even though it has been such a privilege to be able to work on important issues involving electronic records during my time as a lawyer at this agency, I didn't know today what I would say at the end of this speech, but I can tell you that the leadership exhibited by David Ferriero and everything that's happening in this space, the news I wish to make here is no real news. I think I will just continue to work and stick around for a while longer as a federal lawyer. Thank you. Thank you again to the Emmett Leahy Committee for this tremendous honor. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jason, and congratulations again. You said you were humble about adding your name to the roster, and you haven't just filled a slot, you've raised the bar. So my congratulations to you. I'm very proud to be here representing Huron Consulting Group, and you'll be pleased to know that my remarks are the shortest of all of the speakers distinguished today, and I'm just really here. We, as some of you may know, underwrite the expenses of the Emmett Leahy Award. We're very proud to do that as part of our commitment to really manifesting and recognizing excellence in records and information management. The Emmett Leahy Award has long promoted the industry leadership and also facilitated RIM thought leadership, and this has really turned into a global proposition. And in fact, 5 of the last 10 awardees have been from outside the United States, representing the UK, Italy, Australia, and Canada. So we're glad to see the award come back to the United States here. It should be noted that the Emmett Leahy Award is an independent entity and is not part of the Institute of Certified Records Managers, although we've had awards there often, ARMA International, nor the National Archives or Huron Legal. The selection of the Emmett Leahy Award recipient is exclusively the responsibility of the committee, composed of the last 10 distinguished awards of the prestigious award. So I'd like to, in closing, extend my personal congratulations to Jason, a truly deserving recipient of the 2011 Emmett Leahy Award, and nowhere could be more appropriate for this honor than right here in the National Archives. As we close this celebratory event for Jason, I thank you all for your attendance, particularly those of you who have stood up through this whole event, and wish you well from Huron Legal as we continue to pursue excellence in records and information management. And I hope some of you will stick around to share some refreshments for us, which are outside the door that Quinn's put together, and thank you, Quinn, for that. Thank you all for coming.